Crash, Ethan, let me give you, I covered a lot of ground there. Let me get your insights on Rob Ryan, on the special teams coaching situation, and what changes you think are in order for this coaching staff in the offseason. Crash first, and then Ethan.
So it's Rob Ryan. That's been one I know we've been talking a lot about here at the Voice of College Football. And I think it's one that just needs to happen. And it's literally the point you made. There was no Eric Gentry for 2/3 of the 2024 season. And Matt Enns did a terrific job with that room, even without Gentry. And then with Gentry coming back, I mean, just now it's like with Rob Ryan, it's just all he is. It's just really his main thing has been talk. I feel all his interviews, his press conferences. Oh yeah, we're gonna be so great. He's Eric Gentry. He's got, he's a unicorn. He's got planes. All that stuff. I know yes, I know. I'm doing my best with the Rob Ryan imitation, but kind of have to. I feel when you're talking about him, and because it's like he is. I'll give him this, and it's a little off topic. He is kind of an entertaining guy to listen to. I will give him that. But that entertainment behind the mic and in the press conferences and in the interviews has not translated to success on the field. And I think you've talked about how, USC is unlikely to make a change from is unlikely to move on from Lincoln Riley. The only way Riley is gone is if he leaves of his own free will, which I don't see happening. But with Ryan, I feel like that's a change that's not as expensive. And I think also just with what's happened, you have Gentry back, like I said, it just makes sense that you got to make a change somewhere on this defense. And I think that's a good position group to do it, especially when I think while there's certainly a lot of frustrations with the defense, with other aspects of the defense, that's just been the most glaring. And while it hasn't been like the entire defense, and I think obviously Lynn got that contract extension last year, it seems that would make the most sense. As for the special teams, usually those have been, and as for the special teams, that was kind of a frustrating game. But I'm just hoping that that's not a one-off. That was definitely Ryan Sayeri's worst game since he took over as place kicker. So while I think that certainly there are some frustrations and everyone's, been posting memes of the special teams coach and all that on social media, I think Barstool even had the one graphic with a photo of him of means I'm not showing up, I think is what it was, which kind of just summed up how the special teams played that day. I still think that, there's definitely a lot of frustrations there. Definitely, I think that's one where I think you maybe can give that another chance, especially because, it seems like one thing I will give Riley credit on with the special teams thing is he finally has acknowledged that USC does need a dedicated special teams coordinator. So I do acknowledge that he did fix that, but still that's definitely, I think that's one where you actually just have to figure out how to clean up all the penalties. So I don't think you need to let the special teams coordinator go.
So, let's talk about 2024 a little bit because, there's all this talk about, the Matt Ensign, what he did better in 2024 than Rob Ryan's doing better in 2025. And I just want to point out that, there's kind of two ways you can take this. You can take it the kind of straightforward way that, Matt and Crash have been discussing it in the sense that Rob Ryan did more with, or Matt Enns did more with less, and Rob Ryan's doing less with more and whatever. And the linebacker room is really talented. So that's one way you could look at it. I think, though, even if you have the opposite opinion about the talent compared to last year's team to this year's team, it doesn't matter because last year they had Mason Cobb. They had Easton Mascarenas Arnold. Sam Green transferred out and is playing really well at Kentucky, I believe. So that's 3 guys who they lost, who they didn't really replace with any incoming transfers. But that's still a talent evaluation issue. If let's say in some fantasy world that we're not living in, that all these football teams' defensive issues are because the players are just mentally that awful. They just can't get it through their heads what positions to be in at whatever times and whatever. And the coaches are doing whatever they can, but you can lead a horse to water and you can't make them drink whatever. Shouldn't you have kind of known that early on enough to bring in some new guys? I think that's why there's no real angle you can take on this where the coaching staff is exempt from scrutiny. And so I wrote about this at Trojans Wire. I think they probably move on from Rob Ryan. I think they probably move on from Ryan Dowdery as well. Not because Sayeri's been bad or Hank Pepper's been bad, I don't think Sam Johnson's been particularly great, but like we haven't really needed him all that much this year. So it's not been a big issue, except for on the line drive punt that he kicked in this last game. But like it's really the special teams coverage and the special teams return game. Like something that I kind of noticed within the first few games that, nobody was really talking about and no one's really talked about throughout the course of the season is like our special teams coverage is bad. Like we've allowed two big returns in the two biggest games of the season, but also like we're not moving the needle when we get the ball on special teams either. Like I don't recall any touchdowns that we've scored, like, or even any like really long game-changing returns. Like most of the time we're letting the ball go. And it's not that we don't have talent on in that phase of the ball. Like we're putting Mekhi Lemon back there to return kicks. So what is he even doing there if he's just going to call for a fair catch every time or, return the ball inside the 25? Like special teams to me has been categorically terrible the entire year. And I don't really see how you can see it any other way. And so, yeah, I think Ryan Dowdery's in the same kind of class of Rob Ryan as he needs to go. And then, like, I think, honestly, like, most of the defensive staff should be on notice. Like, not necessarily, like, we need to fire everybody right this moment, but, like, are we really feeling like it's been a great year from Danton Lynn and Doug Belk and Eric Henderson? I don't think so. In the biggest moments, they've kind of shrunk away. And again, you could chalk it up to a lot of injuries. And granted, right, there was improvement the last 3 games. And, they've been without Prophet Brown the whole year. They were down Kamari Ramsey and Bishop Fitzgerald in this game. Like, the injuries have happened. But again, like, there was no depth to step up and help with those injuries. It's the reason why we lost against Illinois was because our defense suddenly, turned to butter basically, and the Illinois offense was a hot knife without Kamari Ramsey in there. And then you're missing Kamari Ramsey again, and again the secondary can't stop anything. So I think that like nobody on the defensive side of the ball should be ending the season feeling like they have earned a nice cushy long-term contract with this program, because I think all of them honestly are on the hot seat in my mind. And I think like they have a great opportunity to kind of take themselves off the hot seat next year, getting to work with Tumaine Carroll and, getting that top recruiting class in and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that we should come out of this season really satisfied with anybody. And like, kind of stepping off my box here for a second, like I don't like calling for people's jobs. Like it brings me no pleasure. Like I understand like they're human beings. Also, like losing your job sucks, and like it's a sucky job market for everybody right now, even college football coaches. But like it's more about the love for this program and needing to see better results. And so it's not as much of like a, hey, I take lots of pleasure in seeing these guys, lose their jobs. It's just more, hey, we need to be better, or because in any job you can't accept performance that sinks the entire ship. You need it to be better, or you need changes to be made. So
yeah, it's certainly nothing personal, but if you cover a football team, as the 3 of us do, and that the football program needs an upgrade at a coaching position, then that's what needs to be said. The coaching position, in this case linebacker coach, and one could argue special teams coach, need an upgrade. And it goes back to Alex Grinch, after that Cotton Bowl against Tulane. Like, this is very simple. This is not complicated stuff. Alex Grinch was not the best USC could do, period. Like, you don't have to go into a 10-minute sermon. It's just Alex Grinch was not the best USC could do. And that's why Lincoln Riley needed to kick him to the curb. He didn't. 2023 season got squandered, and here we are, still spinning the program's wheels 4 seasons later. All right, now, Ethan, you mentioned something I wanted to get to. You mentioned Tumaine Carroll. And so for all the frustration and disappointment around here, and people should be disappointed. I'm disappointed. Ethan's sad. Crash is the nice guy. Crash does not, he's not, a breathing dragon, just wanting to torch everyone in a 10-foot radius. But, as frustrated as we all are, I think the one note for optimism is, okay, Tumaine Carroll, Coach Carroll at USC, there's a nice ring to it. He gets his full offseason now. And we have to remember, He came in the middle of spring, and so we all knew, and so therefore it was easy for every USC fan to accept, all right, like he's not going to be able to reinvent the wheel in just, the summer, a couple months. He's going to need a full cycle. He's going to need some time with this team to set everything in motion. So I'm excited, I'm hopeful that a full off season with Coach Carroll at USC pays dividends. And it leads me to this question. You can focus on Tumaine Carroll if you'd like, but you could really go anywhere you want. Which non-Riley assistant or staffer is, in your mind, the most important for USC in 2026? I'm going to give this one to Ethan first and then Crash.
Yeah, I think the only other person that comes, I think Tumaine Carroll is probably most important, but the only other person who comes to my mind is probably Zach Hansen. Just because he has had such a great year, the last thing that I'd want to see, because going back to my earlier point about all the defensive coaches, I don't really see how you don't see this year as a step back for D'Anton Lynn. The defense was worse, and it didn't show up in the biggest games. USC's offense got better and the defense got worse. And yes, there were injuries and a whole lot of other factors, but the fact of the matter is that the defense didn't get better. The offensive line had to endure a lot of injuries as well. And the offensive line, kind of kept on chugging. Thought they played well against Oregon, in fact, despite playing against a tough Oregon defensive line. Couldn't really get anything going in the run game, but that was partially because Oregon's linebackers played an excellent game, not necessarily because the O-line was struggling. And the O-line was great in pass protection. So I just think that, he's a guy who maybe out of everyone on this coaching staff, I feel like I can count on right now. The entire offensive staff has been good. And I mentioned that in my Trojans Wire article too. All the position coaches have been pretty good. And, from Luke Heward and Chad Savage and all those guys. But I think the key to competing in some of those big games next year is continuing to be able to, run both phases of offense, continuing to be able to throw and run the football. Because we saw what happened in this game when we could only throw. And a somewhat, heroic effort from Jaden Maiava and Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane and Tanook Hines didn't really matter because, we couldn't run the football and we couldn't play defense and we couldn't play special teams. So, I think he, of all the guys that I'm confident in and feel good about, he's the most important. But like I said earlier too, the defense, the entire defensive staff just needs to get its act together.
Well, I think D'Anton Lynn, is going to be crucial, especially because the defense is going to need to improve. But I also do think Tumaine Carroll is going to be very critical, especially because from what I've read, just as I've been learning just about everything over my time as a journalist, I've just read how important the strength and conditioning coach is because of how much time they spend around the players because they don't go out and recruit while all the other coaches do. It's said that the strength and conditioning coach probably has the most hands-on time with the players, especially in the weight room. So I think just that. And I think, Matt, when you just brought up that, we kind of had to be patient. Maybe we don't see those results a little bit this year just because of how late Tumaine Carroll was brought in after Lincoln Riley decided to let Benny Wiley go. So I think with this, now that USC has Carroll here for a whole year, and yes, like you said, Coach Carroll, nice ring to it. I agree, Matt. But so, I think now that he's here, I think it's just going to really help. And I think it's really critical, especially with just everything coming. Really seems like this 26 years kind of a put up or shut up year for Lincoln Riley. So I think that with all things going, I think Tumaine Carroll is important because it's going to matter for the results on the field next year. So that he's getting that full off season. And in some ways, is it maybe better that he's in now? So then just even if, we don't see the results that we want as fans, if he's in now and he's not able to get his full year cycle in, you can kind of see where everyone's at. So in some ways, I do think it's kind of maybe smart that Riley brought him in when he did, even if it's not just at the start of the cycle. So then he can really have time to evaluate this season and see where the team is at kind of from a strength perspective. So I'm actually kind of, as I think about it, I think it's kind of smart with when they brought him in. So that's why I think he's going to be really crucial this offseason.
All right, I'm going to answer this question too. The past 2 seasons, so going into 2024 with Tim Prangley, and now going into 2025 with Ethan, and then Crash joined mid-season. I thought that the offensive line was the most important group on the team, and therefore the offensive line coach was the hinge point in terms of whether the season was going to be good or not. And that's why I'm sure Ethan's also sad. Like, we wasted a great year of offensive line coaching from Zach Hansen. Like, the offensive line coach gets an A from me, and I think everyone here. And we still didn't make the playoff because the defense was that bad, and special teams gave up huge kick returns against Notre Dame and Oregon. Like, that's frustrating. But, I mean, at least we have our offensive line coach. Zach Hansen is for real. Like, he could not have done a better job than what we saw. You know, the injuries did catch up with USC a little bit in the running game, but pass protection remained really good the whole season. Like, that's phenomenal. That, you know, teams knew USC was going to have to throw, and the pass pro still held up. So, tip of the cap, Zach Hansen, like the rock star on this staff. Ethan is tipping his VOCFB USC cap. Get one of those at vocfb.com/shop. Proceeds when you get a USC branded VOCFB cap or shirt or coffee mug or tumbler. Go to vocfb.com/shop. They help the USC channel here at the Voice of College Football. All right, so back to tip of the cap to Zach Hansen. So, like, going into 2026, I'm not worried about the offensive line anymore because we have the right offensive line coach. So at least we check that box. So where am I going now? Where does the arrow turn? Woof woof. It's time for some dog work, Eric Henderson. Like, you really need to raise the bar. You're Aaron Donald's position coach. Like, you made your name, your career on that point. I mean, hey, you won a Super Bowl with the Rams. All right. We need that gold standard. We need that Cadillac level coaching at USC. And, you know, it pains me. It pains me to have to do this, but I have to. You know, Brent Venables is going to get to the playoff before Lincoln Riley. I mean, like, oh, that is just a dagger right into my chest. But, like, you got to give the man props. You know, he's going to beat Lincoln Riley to the playoff. I mean, Oklahoma is going to beat LSU at home. I would be stunned if that did not happen. And, like, his offense isn't even that good. Brent Venables has just, you know, become he's become the Shohei Ohtani of defensive coaches in college football. And what's at the heart of it? What has enabled Oklahoma to overcome its mediocre offense and get to the playoff, assuming it beats LSU? Nasty front four, nasty pass rushers. I mean, they just get after opposing quarterbacks. They don't allow them to breathe. Like, that is just a suffocating defense. And, of course, they lock down the run so that they put opponents in 2nd and 8, 3rd and 7, and then they just, you know, rear back and fire. Like, you know, like Oklahoma made Ty Simpson look bad. It made Joey Aguilar look bad on the road. You know, Oklahoma had to win at Tennessee, at Alabama to be in this position. And it was all defense. You know, offense just did a little bit. Wasn't really that special. So, you know, when I think of great programs figuring out how to win, even with limitations elsewhere, and also this is also Curt Cignetti at Indiana too. If your defensive line can be the best position group on your team to the extent that, like, it just devours opposing offensive lines for breakfast, like, you can overcome a lot of weaknesses if you have that. And that's what USC has to get back to. And so it shouldn't be lost on anyone. You know, this is the school that brought everybody the Wild Bunch, you know, in the late 1960s, early 1970s, and then Wild Bunch 2 under Pete Carroll. You know, that nasty front four in 2003, 2004 that brought USC back to the pinnacle. So defensive line is my most important unit right now for 2026. Obviously, the portal and the various transfer movements, you know, who goes in, who goes out. It's might reshape the deck on the margins, on the edges. But like, I doubt I'm going to be here next August saying, oh, this a position group other than defensive line is going to be most important. You know, some might say the secondary, and I get that, but like Prophet Brown never taking the field and the significant multi-game injuries or absences for top players, you know, Doug Belk will have a lot to prove, no question about it, but he had a lot more injuries compared to Eric Henderson. And I distinctly remember being on this show in this summer, and the prevailing sense, I think, from the fan base was that, you know what, defensive line's better and deeper this year. And I think what we all overestimated, myself included, I'm not excluding myself, like I'm guilty of it too. It might have been depth on paper, but it was young depth.
Yeah.
And it was depth that, you know, needed a full season, needed a lot of seasoning, like it wasn't ready to play depth. And I think this is something Ethan has mentioned at Trojans Wire recently, that in the portal, need to get seasoned, veteran, proven linemen. And I would say, in light of what Zach Hansen's done on the offensive side of the ball, like defensive ends and defensive tackles are where USC needs to spend the most money in the transfer portal. I think that's something I can ask of Ethan and Crash. As we look ahead to the offseason, you know, we've talked about coaching changes, but now we also consider the portal and the fine art of roster construction. Would, you know, any disagreement or any additional context on the notion that if USC is going to spend prime top end money in the portal, it has to go primarily to defensive linemen? Ethan, then Crash.
I think defensive line is definitely a key position. I think the defense as a whole, like you're going to need at least one corner, probably two, because, you know, you have DeCarlos Nicholson moving on. I'm not sure if they're going to try to like medically redshirt Prophet Brown so he can come back. I'm not really sure what that situation is, but DeCarlos Nicholson's leaving, and, you know, the younger guys have not really stepped up and consistently been good. I mean, you've seen flashes, but I think like adding a veteran to that room is only a positive thing. Probably at safety as well. I mean, you have Bishop Fitzgerald leaving in all likelihood. And Christian Pierce is, you know, in his third year, and he kind of played a messy game against Oregon. So I would think that, you know, the USC probably wants to get better there. Linebacker too, honestly, like I just think every defensive position group needs at least one or two veterans, because you have Eric Gentry leaving. Desmond Stevens has been kind of a mess. You'd hope that with some better coaching, he'll play better, because he definitely has a lot of potential and a lot of natural talent. But, you know, it hasn't always manifested. And same with Jaden Walker as well. So I think that, like, I don't know, there just needs to be a lot of money spent on defense in general. On offense, I think, you know, USC maybe gets another wide receiver, but I think other than that, like, I'm feeling pretty confident in the offensive roster moving forward. I think, like, another big key, though, this year is going to be retention, because, like, so I saw something recently that, like, 4 of the top 5 impact transfers are all USC exits in the entirety of college football. Like, you have Deuce Robinson balling out at Florida State. You have Zachariah Branch balling out at Georgia. You have, you know, Pregnon and Bear Alexander and Sam Green also all balling out. So, like, you know, USC has a lot of talent that they need to convince to stay, and they didn't do the greatest job of it last year. You know, I don't think wide receiver necessarily was a position where, you know, they needed a ton more depth. I think, you know, we can dream about having, you know, Deuce Robinson and the other two all in the same lineup, but that would have been a lot of touches to go around. So I don't think that that's, you know, the end of the world. But man, would it have been nice to have Emmanuel Pregnon. You know, man, would it have been nice to have someone like Bear Alexander. Man, would it have been nice to have someone like Sam Green on this team. So I think, you know, retention matters almost just as much as going and getting new guys. And I think that, you know, that's probably going to require you to spend some money as well.
I think definitely defensive line is going to be the biggest area where USC does need to upgrade. Not to say that they don't need to spend on their linebacker room and the secondary, because those are definitely crucial. I definitely think linebacker room also is going to need some key transfers coming in this year. But I think when you look at just the defensive line, we talk about big boy football, won and lost in the trenches. Teams play, you win it by running the ball. So I think USC is going to need to have to do better against stopping the run game for opposing offenses. So that's why I think the defensive line is going to be the biggest area where they're going to need to upgrade. And I think, yeah, maybe having a guy like Bear Alexander, although definitely, I mean, obviously I'm not sure he's the right guy in terms of like a cult from how he just fit in with USC. And he seemed to always just seem to have one dispute after another. But in general, I get what you're saying, where it's like you want someone kind of that like kind of capability who's able to just come in and just basically be like a 300-pound wrecking ball. You're going to want guys like that. You're going to want dudes, as I know Matt likes to say, guys who are just going to go in there and just basically just shut down opposing offenses. That's what I really think you need to do. So I really think that's why I think the defensive line is going to be the most important area for USC to really invest in and really get high quality veteran transfers to really help set the tone on the line of scrimmage next year.
Woof, woof. It's time for some dog work at football. All right. So, in terms of the final segment of our show, cause like we're talking about the off season, season's essentially over. We have UCLA, and of course that's going to be our Tuesday show. We always segment these Sunday shows. It's for the review of Oregon, the review of the previous game, and the Tuesday shows are the preview. So Tuesday night's going to be our last regular season game preview show. We'll have plenty about the Bruins. Man, that fake field goal was funny. But Tuesday night will be all about UCLA. But tonight, we're thinking big picture, as I think we should. What the future looks like at USC, what 2026 looks like. And one point I want to address and obviously talk to Ethan and Crash about is, yeah, we're going to play Ohio State. We're going to play Indiana. It's going to be a very tough schedule on paper. But, Penn State looked like a tough team on paper, and it didn't materialize this season. And so one thing I want to say about how tough the schedule is going to be, I want to just introduce a concept if you haven't heard of it before. Maybe you've heard of a college football podcast. Or like, I don't have time to listen to podcasts. I say that not as an insult. It's just like I'm way too busy. I'm editing multiple websites, have various other podcasts, commitments, etc. I just don't have time. So I don't mean it in the insulting sense. Just like I'm pressed for time. The concept I want to introduce is the flattening of college football. And to a certain extent, that means parity. 10 years ago, you went into a season and it was Alabama versus Clemson in the national title game. Like you knew it was going to happen. You knew both teams were going to be there at the end. Kirby Smart of Georgia then got in there. So it was Alabama, Clemson, Georgia. That was the trio of teams. Here we are, and the sport has basically flattened out. And okay, Ohio State's there, but there is so much parity in the sport now. It is so different from how it was. It's not a case of 2 or 3 teams alone have a chance to win the national championship. Now it's very wide open. And some people are going to say, oh no, Ohio State's well above the field. You know what? Arch Manning's not that good, and Ohio State beat Texas by 1 score at home. And you could say it's late August, but still, like if Ohio State really was an ultimate heavyweight all-time team, would have beaten Texas by more. The other thing we have to mention about Ohio State, hasn't played Indiana yet. And we should get that in a couple weeks in the Big Ten championship game. But, Penn State wasn't good this year. And Michigan, okay, like that Michigan game is going to be interesting. But Michigan hasn't been that great. Barely beat Northwestern. USC dog-walked Michigan. It's not how it used to be in the Big Ten. And of course, the old timers, and I wish Gary from Dana Point was here for this one because he'd immediately recognize this. Part of why Woody versus Bo, the 10-year war, Ohio State, Michigan, 1969 through 1978, is so talked about even now. It's such a point of romance among old-time Big Ten fans because those were the only 2 teams making the Rose Bowl every year. No one else was particularly good. So, it was like Ohio State, Michigan, and 8 other completely irrelevant programs for 10 years. It's not as though Ohio State and Michigan weren't really good, but they didn't have a lot of competition. And so it's kind of like that right now in the Big Ten for Ohio State. It's not as though Ohio State's rising. It's that other teams are falling. And that's part of the flattening of college football. You used to have teams that were on Mount Olympus, and like they were so good, they were so deep, they were so loaded, they were so stacked, and other teams didn't have a chance. And this year's Ohio State team really doesn't exist in that category. It's more about teams 3 through 6, 3 through 7 in the Big Ten falling off the pace. So Ohio State and Indiana are what's left. Like, you don't have juggernaut SEC teams. Texas A&M is 11-0, but like, you wouldn't say Texas A&M is a juggernaut team. It was down 30-3 to South Carolina team that's under 500. So we really do exist in a world where college football has flattened out. And so in terms of bringing my questions to Ethan and Crash, okay, USC has to play Ohio State and Indiana and some other really tough teams last year. Like, it's going to be tough, but I think the important thing that USC fans need to realize is it's not as though Ohio State and Indiana are kind of running away and hiding, leaving the rest of the Big Ten in the dust. It's more of they're really solid, and the rest, the like that second tier of the Big Ten has dropped. So like, just what's your confidence level that USC, provided it makes the right changes, which has not happened yet, we hope so, just what's your confidence level about going up against an Ohio State and an Indiana next year and going up against a tough schedule? Like, does it feel like you're climbing Mount Everest, or does it feel like, with a few changes, we could be right there? Well, Ethan first, Crash second.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there when you talked about like the parity and like teams are rising and teams are falling. Like, we definitely want to be one of the rising teams. I don't think there's anyone who would disagree with that. So I think that you need to show that next year. And I think also like the ever elusive thing that Lincoln Riley has not had at USC, because he went and got a couple of really solid wins this year in terms of beating Michigan and beating Iowa at home, and then beating Nebraska on the road, which on in the grand scheme of things isn't that impressive of a win, but like in the grand scheme of last year and us losing to a Maryland team in their only Big Ten win in the entire season on the road, like it still felt like a step forward. So, but like the ever elusive thing has been winning a top 10 game and winning, a good, like a game against a ranked opponent on the road outside of Los Angeles. So I think you got to have one of the two next year. And so I honestly think, like Matt, you said maybe we go 9-3 and like it's still okay. I actually, which it's not often that I'm tougher on Lincoln Riley than Matt, but I'm going to be tougher on him here. And I'm going to say you got to go 10-2, because I think the only losses on paper right now are, Oregon, and the only like one games you as a USC fan would be super duper worried about are Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana, because it's a tough schedule. But USC's road schedule is not that tough. They get UCLA, they get Wisconsin, they get Rutgers, and they get Penn State, who should be better. But I still don't think that if Penn State can turn it around to where they're a better football team than us, in 1 year of their new coach, and USC is in year 5 of Lincoln Riley, and we can't beat them. That's really concerning in my opinion. And then the Ohio State and the Oregon and Washington games are all at home, which USC tends to play much better football in the Coliseum. So I think you got to get at least one of those three teams. You got to get Oregon, you got to get Ohio State, you got to get Indiana. One of the three bare minimum, and get into the playoff. Because like that's been the elusive thing. That's the thing that Lincoln Riley's detractors, his critics, need to see to kind of turn around their opinion of him. That's the thing that the people who support him have been waiting to see. Like, if next year with the number 1 recruiting class in the 5th year of the program, with 2 out of the 3 games at home, if we can't get at least one of the 3, I think we're in big trouble.
I think there's certainly an aspect of, if you can get a few of the right players in, you can certainly turn it around. And I say right instead of best for a reason. I think you can sometimes get all the best guys, but still sometimes things can still go wrong. So I think, I'm not trying to say like best and right can't be the same, but I think it's about getting the right guys in the building next year. So if Lincoln Riley can get the right guys in, I think they can really turn it around. And I think that's what we've seen at some of these other programs. Like we've talked about Indiana multiple times on this show tonight. Kurt Cignetti, he wasn't, like you said, Matt, earlier. It's like he wasn't looking to bring in a bunch, highly touted, like known, coveted guys in the portal. He brought guys with him who knew how to win at James Madison. That's what he brought that helped set the foundation, combined with Curtis Rourke. And that team, yeah, maybe they didn't beat anybody ranked, but they also didn't lose to anybody unranked. Like I said, everyone's all critical about them making the playoff last year. And I'm like, okay, your Val didn't beat any ranked teams, but they also didn't lose to anyone unranked. And their 2 losses, by the way, were to the 2 teams that played for the national championship. So respectable losses. But with what Cignetti did was he just brought a bunch of guys who just were the right fit for what Indiana needed and was able to turn that program around fast. So USC's really got to be critical, really, really be intentional with who they bring in. So I think that's really why I think it can be a quick, I think they can do it, but it's like you said, they gotta at least win those big matchups, the Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. And I mean, I don't think you can count Penn State out either, even just with the momentum they've got now. I mean, they've won 2 in a row now, and players are calling for Terry Smith to get the full-time job. Not sure he will, but you can just see it, that Penn State, even though for as disastrous as their season went, by their standards, they still have not, those players have not given up. And I think that's something that really, I think, shows, like, if you don't give up even when times are tough, like, you can really just persist through it, just persevere through it. But I think USC needs to get a few more of those right guys in the building for that to happen.
It's a fascinating conversation about the 2026 Big Ten. I would just close with this point that, we didn't see the best version of Oregon. This Ohio State team is not as good as last year's. Now, I think Indiana's team this year is better than last year's Indiana, but really across the board, like, you're not seeing most Big Ten teams make significant forward jumps. Like, the territory is open for USC with improvements, with the right moves, to become a challenger to Ohio State. Maybe not on the same plane as Ohio State, but like being the second best team in the Big Ten, right? If USC is the number 2 team in the Big Ten next year, that means a playoff berth. And I would just add, finally, Chad Bowden in the transfer portal. He wasn't brought aboard before the December portal last year. So this is now his first fall portal that he gets a crack at it. So, first full offseason cycle for Tumaine Carroll, first December transfer portal for Chad Bowden, who's really good at shopping for those high-end Whole Foods groceries. So that is another note of optimism. See, we all started with these soapbox rants, and we end with a note of optimism. Wasn't expecting that. But hey, sometimes you get a surprise here on the USC channel at the Voice of College